Today, we are strapping in for a massive one, jumping right into the eye of the storm.
We are.
We're talking about the highly anticipated, and I mean highly controversial,
Yeah.
upcoming film, Christopher Nolan's Odyssey.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission today is pretty laser-focused. We are trying to cut through all the social media noise to really understand why this particular adaptation is, well, provoking such extreme reactions online.
And I think this is an essential deep dive because it really brings you face to face with that age-old dilemma of adaptation.
Right.
I mean, whenever a director of this caliber takes on source material that is, thousands of years old, they are immediately faced with a choice.
Where do you draw the line?
Exactly. Where is that line, functionally and creatively, between artistic license, the need to make a compelling movie that makes money, and historical fidelity? This film is just putting that tension right on full display.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because of the conversation, and this is just based on a few trailer glimpses, it's moved way beyond standard film critique.
Oh, absolutely. Something much more intense.
The backlash has been described as severe, and it really seems to have crystallized around two massive and very, very different areas of what people are calling inaccuracy.
Yeah, the costumes and the casting.
The costumes, specifically the hero's armor, and then the specific casting choices made for these, key mythological figures.
It's just fascinating how the film has to navigate two audiences at the same time. You have the academic or the historical enthusiast who wants fidelity.
Right.
And then you have the mass, modern moviegoer who just expects a visually compelling blockbuster.
And when those two expectations clash,
The internet explodes.
which brings us right to the first major point of contention. The whole aesthetic of the film, but particularly that heavy, almost sci-fi looking armor.
Yeah, the armor on Agamemnon and the other heroes, that was the first thing that really set off the alarm bells for historians, for people who know ancient warfare.
Why is that? What should it look like?
Well, the time period of the Trojan War, which, frames the Odyssey, is roughly the late Bronze Age, Mycenaean Greece.
Okay.
And we have archaeological evidence for this stuff, like the famous Dendra panoply, that shows the armor was very different. It was heavy, sure, but it was often segmented bronze plates or even forms of linen armor.
And what we're seeing on screen is definitely not that.
Not at all. The immediate visual critique is that it's not period accurate, and frankly, some of the design choices are just baffling to the experts.
The quotes around this are, they're intense. I saw one critic, who clearly knows fantasy design, lament that his bar for costume design was already at cosmic lows.
And he was still shocked.
Still shocked. He specifically called out Agamemnon's armor and said it looked, and I'm quoting, more like Batman with a hint of Warhammer 40K.
And that Warhammer 40K comparison is so telling.
For anyone who doesn't know, explain that.
It's this massive, hyper-stylized sci-fi fantasy universe, and it's just known for its over-the-top, bulky, visually aggressive armor. The comparison basically suggests that the filmmakers prioritize this feeling of sheer visual brutality over any kind of historical context.
It's the modern visual shorthand for badass, right?
Exactly.
So the complaint is that these design flourishes, like the really visible, almost sculpted gold spine on the back of the armor, were just put there for modern cinematic appeal.
Absolutely. It suggests the creators were designing for aesthetics, not for adherence to what late Bronze Age armor actually looked like. The whole design feels calculated to resonate with video games and superhero movies.
But that does lead to a critical question of, well, cinematic necessity, doesn't it?
It does.
Because if your goal is to make a $200 million blockbuster, maybe you're making a pragmatic choice for cinematic quality.
Precisely. And that's where the counterargument comes in. Film commentators have pointed out that historically accurate armor, the actual clunky Mycenaean designs, they might just not work on the big screen today.
Right. I saw that AI edit of the trailer floating around,
where they swapped in the accurate armor.
Yeah. And the general consensus was that it looked, and I'm quoting directly here, fucking goofy.
It looked goofy, so there's your trade-off right there.
So you have this incredible choice. Be historically accurate and potentially look silly to a young audience that's used to hyper-realistic CGI.
Yeah.
Or stylize it for maximum visual impact and, box office success.
It's a huge constraint on historical filmmaking. If the truly accurate version fails the visual cool test, the studio is always going to choose the stylized, inauthentic version.
We've seen other big movies try to find a balance, though.
Sure. Think about the movie Troy. While it wasn't 100% accurate, its aesthetic was at least more reminiscent of the period look. It tried to find a middle ground.
And this Odyssey just skipped the middle ground entirely.
Seems so.
So what does this mean for you, listening at home? Is Nolan's choice a necessary creative shortcut driven by modern visual demands? Or is it, like the historians say, just a casual disregard for the source material? That question alone really captures this whole controversy.
And it highlights that not all historical inaccuracies get treated the same way. Which brings us to the second, and I'd say much bigger, point of contention.
Right. And this is where the conversation gets really interesting. Because the armor backlash, while it was intense among experts, is actually way less contentious than the second issue.
The casting choices.
Let's transition to the casting, which has sparked a completely different kind of public debate.
Yes. The casting has moved beyond just costume design and into deeper territory. We're talking about historical and cultural perception of identity.
It's less about what they're wearing and more about who is wearing it.
Exactly.
Now, we've seen some concerns raised over actors like Elliot Page, but the most intense pushback seems to be around the potential casting of major figures. Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy, and Zendaya as the goddess Athena.
And the core argument being made against these choices, it relates to geography and historical perception.
Did you break that down?
Well, critics point out that Helen of Troy in the mythology is the most beautiful person in the world from the Spartan region, tied to Troy in northwest Turkey. So the critique asserts that portraying a figure from this specific region as, and these are the words used, super dark black, quote, doesn't make any sense.
And similar arguments are being made for Athena.
Yes, similar arguments based on a perceived historical identity.
Okay, so this raises a critical question for our analysis. Why does this type of inaccuracy spark such a different, often more severe reaction than the armor? They're both deviations from the source.
But they are weighted completely differently by the audience.
Why?
The difference is knowledge disparity. And this is the core insight here. Think back to the armor criticism. Like we said, 98% of the audience has no idea what Mycenaean armor looks like.
Right. That critique relies on expert, specialized knowledge.
It takes academic study to even know there's a problem. One commentator said you need fucking knowledge just to spot the mistake.
Right.
Exactly. But the casting critique, in this context, it relies less on that niche expertise and more on a widely held public perception, a kind of cultural visual shorthand.
So you're saying it doesn't take genius-level intellects or a PhD for people to believe they know what ancient Greeks look like?
Precisely. Or Vikings, or a Queen of England from centuries ago. It becomes about this general cultural understanding of historical identity versus niche historical expertise.
It's an offense against what the average person thinks they know about history, rather than what the expert actually knows.
That's absolutely right. People believe they have a foundational visual for figures like the Greeks at the time of Troy. And when filmmakers deviate from that image, an image that's been solidified over generations of art and other films, it creates this profound dissonance. It feels like a deliberate challenge.
And this ties directly into that known cultural meme, doesn't it? The whole idea of the Netflix adaptation.
Yes, which has become this shorthand for projects that are perceived to feature controversial race or gender swapping for historical characters.
We saw huge discussions around Cleopatra, for instance.
The controversy around that recent Cleopatra docudrama was intense. The critique there was that Cleopatra was of Macedonian Greek descent from the Ptolemaic dynasty, yet she was portrayed as black. Now, whether that's historically accurate or not, the casting ran counter to a widely accepted visual history.
And the Odyssey casting is now being seen through that same exact lens.
It is. The perception is that the casting choices fundamentally alter the accepted historical identity of the character in a way that the armor, despite being wrong, doesn't.
That's a great point. The armor still looks old and cool, even if it's stylistically from the wrong planet. But the casting challenges a deeply ingrained visual history for a lot of viewers.
And this gets us to the bigger picture. How often do we, as an audience, just accept historical inaccuracy because it's more entertaining? Or because it feeds an image we already like?
So let's dive deeper into that, the concept of accepted inaccuracy. How common is this, really?
Oh, it's constant. The easiest parallel to draw is probably the historical inaccuracy of how we depict pirates.
The classic pirate image, you mean? The parrot, the pig leg, the bandana.
Exactly. That popular image of a pirate is a completely romanced history. It was created largely by 19th century books and early Hollywood. Real pirates didn't typically dress like that.
They're just sailors in working clothes, right?
Simple, practical clothes. Eye patches and peg legs were rare, often deadly injuries. But that specific fictionalized look has been universally adopted as the public's headcanon.
It's the visual lie we prefer to the truth. Hollywood gives us the pirate we want to see.
Which is a perfect parallel for the armor. Give us the stylized, badass Agamemnon, not the one in clunky, maybe goofy-looking plates.
Right. And let's bring back that idea of specialized knowledge, because it really highlights what Hollywood sacrifices for drama. You mentioned the nuclear reactor example earlier.
Yes, that experts are sensitive to things the rest of us just miss.
Exactly. I know people who've worked with reactors, and they are driven fucking crazy when movies misrepresent nomenclature.
Like when a character says the reactor's going critical.
Yeah. In this grave, terrified tone, like, oh my God, the reactor's critical, implying the world's about to end.
When in reality, critical is the normal operating state. It's what you want it to be.
But 98% of the audience has no idea, so the drama works on them. And historical experts feel the same way about the Odyssey armor.
It's the same principle. Or even something like the weight of historical weapons. In movies attempting realism, you see these long, choreographed sword fights.
Right.
But historically accurate swords and shields were heavy, cumbersome. If a movie accurately showed a sword fight where both guys collapsed from exhaustion after 30 seconds,
the audience would demand their money back.
So Hollywood gives us feather-light, hyperkinetic fights that defy physics, and we accept it because it's entertaining.
We accept the lie for the spectacle. So if we connect this back to the Odyssey controversy, it really seems like these two types of knowledge niche, technical expertise versus general cultural history are judged on completely different scales.
That's the central conclusion, I think. The critiques from people with specialized knowledge about the armor, while completely and totally valid, probably won't affect the box office. The mass audience has no idea.
They'll just see it as cool fantasy armor for an old story.
Exactly. But the average viewer is much more likely to be swayed by things that challenge their existing, widely held visual knowledge.
Like the ethnicity of these foundational characters.
Absolutely. The public is likely to forgive the armor for vibes and spectacle, but they may be much more hesitant or even angry to accept what they see as a challenge to the identity of core characters.
It moves the film from just being inaccurate but cool to being fundamentally changed.
A fundamental change, yes.
So, according to the conversation online, what are the two main factors that will actually deter viewers if it's not the armor?
It really seems to be that 1-2 punch of the perceived controversial casting choices.
Because of those differing public perceptions of history.
Right, and the rumored and pretty intimidating 4-hour runtime.
That'll do it.
Yeah, those are the things far more likely to keep people out of the theater than whether the gold spine on a breastplate is an authentic late Bronze Age design.
So, to summarize our deep dive, we really have this dual critique going on. A valid, detailed call for accuracy from experts on the technical side versus a much broader, perception-based critique of casting that the general audience is far more likely to engage with.
It's a choice between offending the niche few or challenging the accepted identity held by the general many.
And what's fascinating here is how that distinction really dictates commercial viability. The difference between esoteric knowledge like armor design and a generally perceived historical identity.
Yeah, one type of inaccuracy is easily forgiven for cinematic quality.
It's just vibes.
It's just vibes. But the other fundamentally changes how the audience perceives the source material in a much more contentious way. And that risks the film's success.
It's the ultimate Hollywood trade-off, which leaves us with one final provocative thought for you to explore on your own. In this age of massive artistic adaptations, where billions are at stake, is the goal of filmmaking to be an educational tool, a faithful recreation of history, complete with accurate but possibly goofy-looking helmets?
Or is the mandate simply to deliver the most compelling, visually badass, and commercially viable story possible, regardless of the historical footnotes we've learned to accept or ignore?
Something to think about next time you see a pirate with a parrot on their shoulder.